Welcome. This
Hello.
is the Royale mayoral close-up pandemic edition. As many of my neighbors know, here in the great city of St. Louis, we are having a new mayoral election coming up, a new style of election too. So we got all sorts of curveballs being thrown at us. Last week we interviewed Kara Spencer, one of the our first interview for this mayoral close-up with this panel plus Maureen Hamlin. But let me get to today. We will be having the Honorable Tishaura Jones with us today. But let me first introduce the panel up to my, I don't know if it's the same with you. Yes, Rebecca Rivas of the Missouri Independence. Hello, Rebecca. Welcome with us today from the other side of Tower Grove Park.
That's right. Thank you very much.
That's right. And then over here is in the square in the corner is Judge Mike Wolf from the other side of Forest Park.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming and joining us today.
Nice to be with you, my friends.
And also,
yes.
We deliver drinks to everybody, and I know it's just noon, so it's now officially time to drink. So, cheers. And
taken care of.
Yeah.
We'll raise a glass. Yeah. This is the Saratoga cocktail, which you can get at the Royale when we open up later in March. So we still got about a month to go, a little less than a month to go before we jump back into the game. But for now, I can't help it, but we love doing these informative, enlightening discussions that we try to have at the bar. And I've tried to get some of the better people here to help guide this conversation with Rebecca and Mike. But hopefully, with no further ado, hopefully we will have Tishaura Jones joining us very shortly. Bill, bring her on whenever seems right. Oh, yeah.
There she is. Hi, Tishaura.
Right. Hi, everybody.
Hey,
cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you for joining us, Tishaura. I hope that this sunny day is treating you well so far.
So far, so
good. To see you
good.
this morning as well.
You too.
Yeah. All right, we are going live. I'm going to let these guys go right at it, but there's so much good information that's going to happen. So I'm just going to kind of dip back into the background, and I'm going to work on production with Bill. All right, thank you.
Well, I thought, good afternoon. Nice to see you.
You too.
And I hope things are going well. I got the pole position of the first question, which is the easiest and hardest question any candidate has to answer, which is, why do you want to be mayor?
Yeah, and mayor in the middle of a pandemic, I might add.
Well, there's a few challenges we have, yes.
Yeah, just a few.
And also that kind of leads to what kind of what problems we have and what priorities are for addressing them. Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. So at the base of my campaign is a belief that you should be able to succeed here, regardless of your skin color, who you love, how you worship, your zip code, or any identity you hold. I want to build a St. Louis where everyone feels welcome. And right now, that's not the case because, we need to say no to business as usual and say yes to a St. Louis that's ready to tackle the 21st century.
So, Rebecca, you want to follow up? There's probably a problem or two you have in mind.
Yeah, I mean, you have so much that you are, if you are elected, that you would have to tackle, but I think we're going to start with the crime and your crime platform. So let's just pretend that we're at the Royale and maybe you're not even running for mayor. You're just having lunch with Judge Wolf and I, and we're talking about how much crime there is in the city. And you are saying, you know what, I have a great idea. I heard about this thing going on in St. Paul, and I heard about this other thing called focused deterrence. Those are the two things that are on your platform. Just kind of like give us the we're friendly having a lunch and you're not a mayor candidate and you're not, giving us like data-driven solutions. You're just telling us, what your good idea is.
Well, I firmly believe that with our crime problem, it doesn't start or stop at the borders of St. Louis. Like it doesn't stop at Skinker Boulevard, nor does it stop at the Mississippi River. And so a community first public safety plan brings everybody to the table. That's law enforcement, that's faith, our civic leaders, philanthropy, everybody to the table. because we didn't get into this overnight or by ourselves, and we won't get out of this overnight and by ourselves. We need to develop the mentality that our destinies are linked and we are our brother's keeper. And how better to do that than to bring everybody to the table to solve our crime problems, to declare gun violence as a public health crisis, to bring on the help of our flagship universities. I don't think we utilize St. Louis University and Washington University enough as we look at the problems that we face and how to engage the students and faculty there. And also, those were the biggest pieces of it. Like focused deterrence is working well other places. But the theme that I see amongst all cities that have had a marked reduction in crime is that everyone is at the table. We can no longer say, well, that's the city's problem or that's this municipality's problem. No, it's all of our problem.
So I heard about this Community First. It's Mayor Melvin Carter, right, in St. Paul. Okay, so he has like a $1.7 million proposal that would do what? Can you explain a little bit what it is that he's trying to do and why you want to do it here?
Well, he's bringing everyone to the table to make sure that people have options, right? When you think about crime, and especially crime in St. Louis, 80% of the crime is done by 20% of the people. And so, how do you bring all of the people to the table to make sure that we are addressing the root causes of crime? And we have to have a shared destiny and shared outcomes.
Okay, I'm just going to keep driving in on this just for one more question. So this $1.7 million, it divides up in various different ways to expand access to programs and resources for children and families. That's actually 24% of that. 15% is to support connected and inclusive neighborhoods, expand opportunities to educate. And so they have various different ways to do that. You have after school programs, you have a lot of different things. And actually, $1.7 million is not that much money when you break it up in a lot of different ways. I guess I'm just really trying to ask you to kind of walk me through, like, you're mayor, you want to do this. What does it take to put this into place? Why would you be able to do that?
I see the mayor as a convener of sorts, and someone who can bring all the affected parties to the table. And in this case, everybody is affected by crime, whether you have experienced or not, or someone who experienced it, or you're a business owner who's heard that St. Louis is one of the most dangerous cities in the country. Crime affects everybody, and so how can we bring again everybody to the table to come up with solutions and resources for our families who experience crime either directly or indirectly?
Not too many years ago, the police department was run by a commission appointed by the governor, and now it's a local control. So the mayor has a significant and central role in that. Are you satisfied with the way that part of our government is being run?
That we now have local control of the police?
And also the way it's been carried out by the people who are currently in office.
Well, obviously I don't agree with how our current mayor is handling public safety, or else I wouldn't be running. And I do think that there are some major infrastructure changes that have to happen within our public safety department in order to make sure that we are putting the public back in public safety. And by that, I mean investing in things that make people safe in their neighborhoods and in their homes. And I've been advocating for social workers in the police department since 2017. And in her last year in office, she finally started the Cops and Clinicians program. These are things that we've seen that work well in other cities, and we have been slow to adapt what works well in other places and bring that to our environment.
Rebecca, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would kind of move towards the budget then. You have the power, you have a certain amount of power over the budget, being on the board of ENA. Can you explain, particularly with focused deterrence, that's going to take a network of resources to put in place. But I'll just kind of give a brief explanation of how I've heard it happens in places that are implementing it, such as Oakland. You have somebody who is a victim of a shooting of some kind or some kind of violent crime, and so you kind of reach out to all the people who might retaliate in that sense. It's similar to Cure Violence, but it's actually done with the police department and with the circuit attorney. Right. So you have to, as you said, bring everybody to the table, but then you have to be able to offer them resources to drug addiction programs, to job employment. That's going to take a certain amount of money. How are you going to implement this and adjust the budget in whatever way you need to implement that program?
Well, I think that we have the resources we currently need in our city to address this and to use this successfully. I was on a forum just a couple of nights ago where it was revealed that St. Louis has 17,000 nonprofits, or some crazy number, like it's either 1,700 or 17,000 nonprofits. And I think that I think that our corporations and our philanthropic organizations would be willing to invest if there was a plan. Because I said this maybe 2 years ago on New Year's Eve, that we suffer from not having a detailed plan on how we're going to address crime and public safety in our region. And I always say region because we have to address this as a regional issue. It's not just St. Louis City's issue, because again, it doesn't stop at our borders, and crime affects everyone no matter where they live.
They closed the workhouse has been an issue. You've taken a position on it. Kara Spencer has taken an issue on it. Lewis has taken one or two positions on it. So why don't you give us a little explanation about the city jail, the workhouse? We've got people who are being detained who haven't been convicted of crimes, right, but they're there for a year or two in actually downtown in a facility that was designed not for residential living for a long. You can't even go outside. I mean, so you've got you're inheriting. You will, if you're married, you'll inherit I think a huge problem.
Yeah, exactly. And we need to make sure that people's constitutional rights are upheld, because what does the Constitution say? That you have a right to a speedy trial. Well, being in there for a year is not speedy. So how can we work with our current circuit attorney's office and the judges to make sure that we are moving people through the system, and also making sure that we're holding the right people? Because if we're holding someone for a parole violation, and it's something minor, then is that really the right place for them? Is that really the right approach? And so we need to take a look at our entire criminal justice system, because it's broken, and work with the circuit attorney, our judges, our police department, to make sure that those who are there for a reason, and a very serious reason. But if not, what diversion programs can we use, like drug courts or other diversion programs, and how can we again match people with resources so they don't turn back to a life of crime?
Mm-hmm.
Would you appoint a new public safety director?
I think everything's on the table, but yes, I would.
Would you appoint a new police chief?
I'm the jury's out on that. I've talked to several officers who have said that that Hayden's hands are tied because of Edwards. But I would definitely have a conversation. But like I said, everything is on the table.
When you look around the country, and you had a reference to St. Paul, I lived there for a time, many years ago. But also, and Rebecca mentioned Oakland. If you look around the country or you think about historically in St. Louis, there are models of leadership, of people who are leaders. Who would you mention that you kind of look to when you ask yourself, well, what would X do in this situation?
Right.
What would he or she do? Right. So that's who is X?
Yeah, I would say it's maybe not just X, but X, Y, Z, A, B, C.
Yeah.
There are several leaders that I look at that I really respect the work that they're doing. Mayors Steve Benjamin and Michael Hancock are two of my close friends, and I call them frequently for advice and guidance. I really like the tone that Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms sets in Atlanta. And I really respect the strength that London Breed showed at the beginning of the pandemic with how she approached shutdowns for San Francisco. And obviously Melvin Carter, because we integrated the Community First public safety plan into our platform. And as also vice versa, he has implemented the Office of Financial Empowerment into his administration. So we get ideas from each other. We share platforms. We share ideas all the time. And I look forward to continuing to share ideas with them.
Right around this time last year, Superintendent Kelvin Adams was making presentations to the community, to various different stakeholders, to teachers, to community members about the state of public schools, St. Louis public schools right now. One of the big things he said was that there are fewer public school students now, well, at least last year around this time, and there are more public schools. So like in the past 10 years or so, we've decreased public school children, but increased public school buildings. And so that obviously creates a challenge for people who are trying to share resources. And his overall take, I think it's something that people are commonly talking about now, is there needs to be a plan in place. You can't just keep opening up schools if you don't have the same amount of children. So if you could kind of just talk a little bit about how you're going to address the situation and what your leadership role would be.
Well, you know, it's funny how the mayor gets blamed for the problems of the public schools, but has no direct impact or direct authority over public schools. But I've often said that doesn't mean that we can't be a better partner with our schools, because economic development and education go hand in hand. When people leave the city, let's just be honest, they leave the city with their families for better education options in some of our suburban districts. And so one of the things I would like to champion is bringing the special school district into St. Louis public schools and seeing what that process is for us. But also putting more school board or school representatives on some of our development boards, so they can be at the table when decisions are made about abating our property tax dollars, 60% of which goes to our public schools. Mm-hmm. So we need to be a better active partner. And I have been as treasurer through the College Kids Children's Savings Account program. We are constantly in the schools reading to kids and reminding them about these accounts and showing them how to use them, talking to our teachers as well, how they can use it as another curriculum tool. And so I would love to see that it's integrated into our school culture, that they would that this program is something that is, like I said, integrated in the culture, and have an open door policy. But not only our superintendent, because we have to acknowledge that charter schools are here and they're here to stay. So how can we be a better partner with all of our education options? Because the goal is making sure that every school, no matter where it's located in the city, is delivering a quality education, and that that school building has everything that child needs.
You know, one of the things that comes up when you talk about schooling and schools and people leaving the city, people coming into the city, and that is there is a vast disparity in the ability of people to accumulate family wealth, which you, I think, have in part addressed through the college program that you're looking at. And that is, so talk a little bit about that, because that is something that's really kind of structural. It dates way back to when the Federal Housing Administration was built, and there was a lot of redlining going on. So certain parts of the city benefited and other parts didn't. And it really carries us through to today's present stuff. So you're looking at both how to unravel some history, but also to move things forward in a way that empowers people and gives them some wealth to pass on to their next generation.
Right. I think that my generation is the first that will be able to pass down wealth. I think I'll be able to pass down wealth to my son and my unborn, unconceived grandchildren. But that wasn't an option for my grandparents because they couldn't buy homes until the 50s and 60s. My grandfather had to move to Illinois in order to find a job in his trade. He was a union painter and couldn't find a job in St. Louis because racism. And he wasn't able to find a job as a union painter until East St. Louis got his first Black mayor. And then he moved his family to East St. Louis and purchased a home in the late 60s. My grandfather on my mother's side was able to purchase a home in the mid to late 50s, actually in the neighborhood that I live in now. But both of those homes are now gone, and there's no wealth to pass down through generations because no bank would lend my grandmother money to fix up her home, even though she could afford the payments. And then lightning struck my other grandfather's home, and then they had to tear it down. And it's a known fact that most African Americans hold wealth in their homes, and redlining still exists because the same housing stock that's in the 2nd Ward and the 27th Ward in North St. Louis is the same housing stock that I see when I'm in the 13th and 16th Wards, you know, with the arched doorways and, 1.5-story homes. I see the same exact housing stock, but somehow if it's in South St. Louis, it's worth $20,000 to $40,000 more than it is when it's in North St. Louis. And so redlining still exists. I've seen it in the treasurer's office as we talk to our financial institutions about their lending patterns. It's clear that there's no lending going on in North St. Louis. But it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because if you can't lend if there are no comps, and there are no comps, there are no appraisals, right? And so we have to somehow break up that horrible cycle. And there are programs that are being started that may make a difference, like the Green Lining Fund, which lends for the difference between the cost and would be between the appraisal and what it needs to be in order to have decent comps in the neighborhood, or maybe fix up the home. And so we need to challenge our financial institutions to do more to make sure that we are building families to have generational wealth to hand down to their children and grandchildren.
That's it. Thank you. As far as one of the things I keep hearing right now with the pandemic is a lot of people are losing their homes, and people are being evicted throughout the state. But I know that St. Louis has a moratorium which goes beyond the federal moratorium, the CDC's moratorium, where you have to present some kind of declaration form to the judge in order to that to actually be in effect. So people are still being evicted in other parts like Kansas City. But And I'm just going to add to that, saying that an eviction means you don't leave, they don't get you out of your home. There are still people who are getting orders, so once the moratorium is lifted, then there'll be, I know it's 500 in St. Louis County currently, so I imagine it's comparable in around, 300 in St. Louis City, that once the sheriff's department is given the okay, they're going to go and start making people leave their homes, they're going to. So I guess I'm just trying, this will be another thing that is on your plate. You are going to have an eviction crisis. So what are some things that give you hope, or, what are some programs you think that, as you mentioned with the green lending, so that's for buying homes, but what can you do as in your role as mayor to really address that crisis that will be, if you're elected, on your plate?
Well, I just read yesterday that the Biden administration extended the moratorium until June. And I totally expect that we'll have to extend it past then too, because people need relief right now. And so I am hopeful in the current stimulus package that there will be direct aid to cities. In the current version of the bill, St. Louis stands to get about a little over $400 million. And as a result, we'll be able to provide more aid to families as they face with rent relief. So I look forward to doing that if elected. And, we also have to continue to work with our nonprofits across the city who are also doing the work in helping people stay in their homes. I've also done a couple of Facebook shows through what we call Tips with the Treasurer, where we partner with local organizations or experts to let people know what their rights are. And we partner with the Legal Services of Eastern Missouri in order to let people know what their rights are as far as being a tenant and what their rights are related to the eviction moratoriums.
I'm going to add a follow-up question to that, if I can. The current administration has a pretty fractured relationship with those who are out working with the unhoused population. If you can talk, if you know about that current situation, if you could talk about it, and secondly, what would it look like in your administration?
I tell you, it'd be totally opposite of what the current administration's relationship is. I saw an article. I want to say, I can't remember where it was, but I saw where the current administration told the Continuum of Care, or one of the unhoused organizations that supports the unhoused, that the city is not your personal piggy bank, which I thought was really in poor taste. And the Continuum of Care has been out here doing God's work, taking care of the unhoused. We don't have a shelter that has a low barrier to entry. I was one of the only candidates in 2017 that was against closing the New Life Evangelistic Center because there was no backup plan for a low barrier shelter. Now, regardless of what you think of Larry Rice and what happens in that shelter, we still needed a backup plan. I always say you don't quit a job if you don't have another job to go to. And this is one of those situations where we were closing a facility and we didn't have any backup for our unhoused. So I want to work with the Continuum of Care to help them provide services for our unhoused, but also make sure that we are providing services around the region and not just in the city. We need shelters everywhere, not just St. Louis City and County either. Homelessness happens everywhere. And how can we work with the other counties to make sure that we have services for people no matter where they are? And then also with the tiny home village, I've heard that the barriers to entry are so high that it's basically empty. So that doesn't help our unhoused. So how can we work within the current system with our current partners to be a better partner and to help our unhoused get off the streets?
Of the 400 million you mentioned about that the Biden administration expects to be able to make available to the city, to address, I guess, this particular set of problems. Because one of the things about an eviction moratorium is that a lot of the housing units that are rentals are owned by people who may own like one other. They live in one and they rent the other one out or something. They're also small players. So is there money in there for, just as a matter of information, is there money in there for them as well? Because otherwise the housing stock is going to be depleted just by virtue of small landlords going broke.
I mean, I'll have to look at that. I mean, I haven't had and I'll be totally honest with you, I haven't had an up close and personal conversation or view of how the money has been distributed so far, and if it has been distributed to, small landlords. But I definitely feel like that's something we should consider.
Just to shift topics for a moment, we're in this new world of electoral, this primary where there's kind of a preference and then you end up with two candidates. How do you think that, I mean, you've run citywide before, so this is a different deal. What's it feel like? How do you see it working or not?
Oh, it definitely has its uncertainties. But I supported it because I felt like people deserved a choice. And when we saw what happened in 2017 and how the vote was split because people preferred several candidates, I think that had we had this around in 2017, we would have had a different outcome, obviously. But I definitely feel like the main reason why I supported it is because there are times when people do like more than one candidate, and they should be able to select more than one candidate that matches their ideals or their morals or their platform interests. And so we will see what happens on March 2nd and also on April 6th. Now, what I will say, some of the unintended consequences of this particular voting method is that it's only going to give the new mayor 2 weeks for transition between election day and between inauguration day.
Also, you have to get people to. Are you getting some sound?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we can.
And also, you have to tell people to go vote in April.
Yes.
Because the previous one, the action was in the primary in March, but now it's just as important to go to the polls when you've got a choice of two.
Yep.
Because it's not like everybody's going to say, well, the Democrat's going to win anyway, so why bother? There isn't a Democrat, right?
Right.
They're all Democrats, however you want to look at it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there was another point I was going to make. Actually, when we tweaked it, because it's I'm sure it's going to come back to be tweaked. I would also like to see that if you get more than 51% in the primary, you shouldn't have to run for a second time in the general. And so we will definitely see that with the aldermanic races that only have two people running against each other. They'll have to run twice.
Right.
Also, you've got a board of aldermen that's about to go from 28 to 14. How do you see that?
I joke and say that it's like the Hunger Games.
We were saying that about the vaccines a while ago.
Oh no! That's going to be the Hunger Games. And I do support an independent redistricting commission. And I heard that is going to be a possibility to be on the ballot in maybe November. So I support independent minds coming to the table to draw those new wards to make sure it's fair, transparent, and equitable.
Everybody I ever knew who represented a district knew what his or her district wanted to look like after the reapportionment, right? So you're trying to take that away from them, that one little guilty pleasure they have, and that is choosing their own voters. Come on.
Well, if we have to do it in the if we had to do it in the House of Representatives and the Senate, they are drawn by independently appointed commissions. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Yeah. I guess I wanted to just ask about this broader point, maybe nothing like really connected to your platform, but when the pandemic first began, it became apparent, and I think somebody who really pointed this out to me was Rebecca Bennett, who was leading the pandemic response, the community outreach for the region, and she was explaining that in other places there is a structure to respond to something like this, but St. Louis really relies on relationships. So if you have a good relationship, then that area response was better. There was, for instance, in St. Louis County, there was a good relationship with the United Way, and there was some, obviously, with the Urban League, but there was a fractured relationship with the homeless advocates and those who were providing care for that. So there was, in the city, that response was not as seamless or good. So how can you take St. Louis's structure of just relying on these relationships? Like, the better relationship you have with somebody, the better that response, particularly in COVID, will be. I mean, I guess just what are your thoughts about that? St. Louis being relationship based, and how can we make a structural change to make equity really stick, rather than just, we have a good relationship with them and this is going to work or not?
Yeah, I think the people lose if that is the case about our response. And then also, our health department has been constantly defunded for the last several years, and also does not do any direct services. We don't do immunizations anymore. I happen to be working at People's Health Centers, 12 to 15 years ago to stand up the immunization clinic when the city stopped doing immunizations or walk-in immunizations. So since we don't provide direct services, we were essentially required to respond to a pandemic with duct tape and paper clips. And so we had to, and we still will have to, rely on our neighbors and other community organizations to help us respond in a proper fashion. I see us strengthening our relationship with St. Louis County and their health department. So, and our federally qualified health centers or community health centers, to make sure that everybody that wants a vaccine can get one, and everybody who wants testing can get one. And unfortunately, we also saw the fractured relationships in the different health directives that we saw between St. Louis City and County, between the occupancy percentages within restaurants, or whether you could even eat inside a restaurant. And that, in my opinion, just really hurt us, and it hurt the people.
When you've been talking about, things that you can do as mayor, the political scientists refer to St. Louis's structure as a weak mayor system. And there's a dispersal of power. There's the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, and there's a Board of Aldermen and all that kind of stuff. So what powers of the mayor are important to you, or what non-powers that the mayor has that you can nevertheless have some say in? The question is, well, how do you carve this out in a, quote, weak mayor system?
Yeah, so, a system is only as weak as the person in it, in my opinion. And so if you know that it's a weak mayor system and you approach it like that, then obviously you'll be a weak mayor. But if you know it's a weak mayor system and you approach it from a position of, how can I build relationships and collaborate with people that I know that I have no control over what they do, but could be a collaborative partner in their success, then I think that that makes a total difference. Mayor Slay, like him or love him, was a strong mayor in a weak mayor system. He was able to, we didn't always agree, but he made sure that his office was open to me. that his staff were available, and the help that I needed, he or his staff provided. And that's what I think that a mayor could be doing. And we all know that we have 8 or 9 citywide elected officials, and the mayor has no say over their offices. But again, it doesn't mean that the mayor can't be a better partner for those independently elected offices. And so how can we all come to the table to talk about the issues that we are currently facing, and try to solve them together instead of going back in our individual silos?
I think one of, when I was hearing you talk about the finances and the loans, I could see you kind of spark up. That's like your strength, right? You like those numbers. You like,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, what excites you? I mean, what is going to be like the exciting thing from your background with finance that you get in there and you're like, I've got control, if you're elected, I've got control of these finances, or, whatever aspect of it. What is exciting for you to try different things?
I'm excited to try and implement new programs where things have worked in other cities and try to bring them to our environment, tweak them, and let them roll. And we've seen that obviously with the Cops and Clinicians program, which I plan on expanding. I am also data driven. So how can we put our data out there for everybody to see, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent? And I got this idea from Columbia, South Carolina. Their police department does an annual report. And whether the numbers are good or bad, they put that information out there for everybody to see. And you pay our salaries. You pay for everything that we do. Our city is run by tax dollars, and who pays that? The hardworking people that live within the city and work within the city. So how do we make sure that we're being as transparent as we can and giving you all of the data, good, bad, or indifferent, that lets you know how we're doing?
On that subject, wouldn't then this gets to the question of some kind of unity between city and county? If the city, for example, would become a municipality within the larger county, then the data could be aggregated and it would look different.
Yeah.
And it would look more attractive if you're going out and saying, here, come to St. Louis, because we do have these kind of fragmentation of our data, and you can look at it a number of ways and it looks really bad, but if you look at it in the aggregate, it looks pretty damn good. So what is there any kind of like unification or some kind of integration of the city and the county that you would be looking to pursue?
I mean, I think we should have the conversation. We didn't even get a chance to have that conversation because the Board of Freeholders process never started, because the city didn't appoint its 9 freeholders. So I would be open to having the conversation and seeing what works. But I look at city-county merger as a huge elephant, because it back in the 1800s when it happened, we were obviously different than we are now. And how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So I would look to have multiple freeholders boards and let's tackle one topic at a time. And that way we're used to having the conversation of being unified and together on different topics like education, our fragmented police departments, our fragmented fire districts, our health departments. So let's our taxation system, right?
How about the airport?
That's on the table too. I think everything has to be on the table because we have been doing the same thing the same way for decades or hundreds of years, and we cannot do it the same way and expect a different result.
I know you've talked about there being report after report, right? We have all of these reports that tell us our problems. We have the Ferguson report. We have most recently the Teneo studies of the police departments. We have there's the equity indicators that are currently on the website now. So we have a lot of reports that tell us that we have a huge racial equity problem, or many racial inequities. what do we do from here? We have all of the evidence we need to do something about it. What do we do from here?
We're champions of reports.
We are. And so I think it's time for us to have a bonfire in front of City Hall and put every last one of those reports in that bonfire. And we need to chart a path forward, because all of the reports are telling us the same thing. We're hyper segregated. We need to address racism. We need to invest in areas that we haven't invested in for decades. Our schools need help. We overuse our tax incentives for developers. Our police need help. We know what the problems are. We don't need another report to tell us what to do. So, first 100 days, let's have a bonfire.
Well, in that vein, I guess in 10 years, what would you like St. Louis to look like then? If it's not divided by Del Mar, where it looks like there was a completely different country north of Del Mar that was bombed out in some war and never ever recovered. What would your dream look like, and how do we get there?
So my dream in 10 years is that St. Louis has a population of at least 500,000. Let's start there. And that the vacant lots that we see today are infilled with new homes, that the housing stock that's currently there is repaired and rehabbed, that the families who have been there for years, that we had developed some sort of program to make sure that they can still afford to stay in their homes, and have given them, loans or grants to fix those homes up. That our schools, that our schools are delivering a high quality education, no matter where it's located in our city, that you will get the same sort of attention and everything you need at Herzog in the north side as you would in Shenandoah on the south side. And that your zip code doesn't determine your opportunity. I would also see more commercial development in North St. Louis, that we wouldn't have bank deserts and food deserts, and not just grocery stores, but restaurants that have healthy options, sit-down restaurants in North St. Louis, because currently, they're just not there. We see a whole bunch of fast food restaurants, but we would have Martin Luther King, for example, would look like Cherokee. In some places, because it has so much opportunity for commercial development there. And again, at the base of my campaign is a idea that everybody can succeed here, regardless of any identity they hold. So that St. Louis would be a living and breathing testament to that statement in 10 years would be my ultimate goal.
In 1993 or 1994, when I was working for the governor, I had a conversation with a state demographer who told me that by 2017, St. Louis would be behind Springfield in population. That did not happen, but we were in a declining state, and then we started gaining more younger white people coming into the city. The city kind of turned around in that respect. And then our latest demographics, and I don't study them, you may have may have a more nuanced view of it, but African Americans have been moving away from the city, and some younger white people are coming in. So there's some questions that, are we asking the right questions of the people who are leaving, and are we asking the right questions of the people who are coming in? Why are you coming to the city? Because there's a lot of really convenient older stock, but there's a lot of neat stuff in the city. There's a lot of things to drive people in if they're willing to invest and take risks. So I'm really kind of asking a question about community development writ large, which has kind of been a separate kind of thing. I mean, it's been part of the city, but also kind of a separate kind of thing. How would you approach those kinds of issues? Because you're going to try to get up to 500,000.
Right.
That means you're going to have to convince a whole lot of people to come into the city.
Well,
Yeah,
I got 10 years to do it.
Yeah.
But I would say, even as I canvas, because I do canvas personally, I don't just leave it up to the people that we hire or volunteers. I find that people with school-age children leave the city because for better educational options. There are several friends that I have who have children with special needs, especially that have left the city because of the special school district is a part of St. Louis County districts, but not part of St. Louis City districts. So I would say that is one of the biggest things. I think also opportunity and safety is a big driver of people leaving the city. We also, we're not saying just leave the city as for just going to St. Louis County. They leave the city for other cities. I had a friend that recently moved to Atlanta because she felt like that city offered more for her and her son than St. Louis does.
That's been true for about 25 or 30 years or more, basically since Maynard Jackson's time, which is actually longer ago than that.
Right.
But they'd managed to get the power structure of their city so that there was more of a sharing opportunity. That really did look like there was more opportunities there. So the question is, how do you make that happen in St. Louis? That's the real question.
So I'm a student of some of Maynard's work, and the one thing that I have studied about him is, with minority inclusion programs, he often said, I didn't have a minority inclusion program or a set aside program. I just set it aside. And so you have to sometimes be a strong arm and use the office in a powerful way that really moves the needle for Black contractors and Black businesses to be able to succeed here. I also have noticed that one of the biggest complaints I hear from business owners is how difficult it is to get a business license and start a business in St. Louis. So how do we streamline that process and make it easier for businesses to do business here? Because I don't even think it's about the earnings tax. It is just difficult to do business, to open a business and stay in business in St. Louis. And so how can we help our entrepreneurs open businesses, renew their businesses, and get out of the way?
Yeah, it's good. I'm just kind of enjoying your guys' conversation. It's like, yeah, no, I was just thinking as you were talking about people who you're studying under, who've done, have increased their city's populations. Are there other ones that you're looking at? People who have invited, who've somehow attracted people to come and live. And I guess what are some of the things that you're like, wow, yeah, that's cool. Let me try that.
Yeah, so I am also a friend with Vi Lyles, who's the current mayor of Charlotte. And if you haven't heard, Charlotte gains 120 people a day. That's how they're growing. And one of Vi's employees, who's head of over affordable housing, she and I went to Harvard together. So I talk to her frequently about, what she's doing. I'm actually trying to convince her to come consult with us because I'm like, what are you doing? And can you bring it here?
Yeah.
Well, there's a fair amount of tech activity in the Cortex Center and in the T-Rex place downtown. And so there is some startup culture that has been nurtured here. Yeah. And the question is, how do you make it work? How do you make things like that work for the rest of
everybody?
The city?
Exactly. Right. So why can't we have a Cortex North right where the old armory was, or even where the old Ford plant was, right? How do we expand opportunities so everyone has an opportunity to have a part in it?
Well, you've got a bunch of spies coming in.
NGA. Oh, NGA, yeah. Yeah. But we have to prepare our kids to take those jobs. So, what school is currently poised to train our kids for those jobs of the future. Another city I study is Denver, because they grew a lot through obviously through Colorado's recreational marijuana.
I was gonna say,
but we just opened the door with medicinal.
Mm-hmm.
So they always say that medicinal is the first step to recreational. And so what do we need to do to work with that community to then be ready for when we go to recreational?
Mm-hmm. And make sure that the city gets some piece of that pie.
Well, right now, I think it's all most of it goes to veterans,
Right.
but still we can provide services for veterans within the city and get some of that money too.
Well, I see that our proprietor has joined us.
Yes, I have.
I mean, the proprietor of the Royale, he's out. We don't work for him.
I've been very much enjoying today's discussion. I got to say, I'm so happy to have such great hosts and such a great guest here. I hope people are learning quite a bit, dipping into this conversation, which we will archive up online on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, and on Facebook as well. This conversation is fascinating, and I think it's a conversation that's long overdue. And I'd like to thank you all for being a part of this conversation. I would like to say we got more of these, but Lewis Reed has declined to participate, so I guess his loss then. But the door is open if anybody to get this conversation going again. I know we got another big run coming up in April as well, but we've heard a lot from everybody here, and I'm truly appreciative. As for the Royale, we'll be open later in March at some point. We'll be announcing that stuff soon.
Maybe in time for St. Patrick?
We'll probably do something a little bit on St. Patrick. If not fully open, we'll at least be partially open by that point. So
I'm not encouraging bad health behaviors. I'm just asking about your schedule.
That was the day it all hit the fan last year. That's for sure.
It was.
That was
wow.
pretty much it.
Right.
Yeah, that was it. When it came to full culmination, so it was this very surreal last 12 months, I got to say. And it's exciting to know that we'll be able to renew things, hopefully, and to a better direction. So,
yeah,
it's good to know the community spirit is still very strong here, and that you can witness this just by this conversation. So,
Well, thank you for having us, and thank you for the now empty.
Yeah. I know. Did you tell Lewis about the drink? I mean, it was great.
I told him, I said, it's going to be fun. This is not going to be the standard one, but
We're not encouraging day drinking during a pandemic, but
you don't need to encourage it.
I think people get that idea on their own.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, thank you so much, guys.
Right.
Thank you to Bill, who's handling this on the production end, and I'm sure we'll be discussing more of these things in the future. But thanks.
Yes.
A lot, guys.
thank you to our
Thanks for having
guests.
me.
Thank you for being brave enough to run for mayor of St. Louis. Thank you.
Thanks. Pray for me.
Indeed.
All right.
All right. Good to see you.
You too.
Cheers.
Bye.